Kelly is the Director of Quality at Qualio, helping customers and the company adhere to the evolving regulatory landscape. She serves as an advisor to more than 20 medical device and pharmaceutical companies and leads a team of talented, industry experienced quality professionals who work daily with companies in regulated industries. Stanton brings more than 20 years of experience in both the pharmaceutical and medical device industries to the world of small startups and scalable quality system implementations. Having been an implementer, administrator, and user of many different eQMS tools on the market, she has built several quality systems. At this point, I turn it over to Kelly. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Robin. I appreciate it. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. Very excited to speak to you guys a little bit today. I'd like to start off just sort of with a quick introduction of Qualio. As the sponsor of this webinar, we are an eQMS tool. So any topics related to electronic quality system management are, of course, near and dear to our hearts. Qualio is a purpose-built, all-in-one QMS tool. It serves lots and lots of industries, but it does cover the entire breadth of quality system requirements. We have built-in best practices related to FDA compliance, ISO compliance, European regulations, etc. And we have, as Robin mentioned, we do have a large team on staff of folks who are from industry to help you be successful with our software. We pride ourselves on being easy, scalable, and trusted, and we can talk more about that later. Do feel free to reach out to me through the contacts after the webinar if you would like to discuss Qualio in more depth or have more a presentation of our software. Sorry. Today, I am very excited to talk about building compliance and a topic near and dear to our hearts: early implementation of electronic quality management systems. You know, I think a lot of people think they can get by on paper for a while and then implement an eQMS tool later. Today, Penelope Przekop is joining me to talk about why we think you should do it earlier in the process. So with that, I would like to introduce Penelope. She is the CEO of PDC Pharma Strategy. She is a corporate quality management expert, founder and CEO of PDC Pharma Strategy, and serves as the Chief Compliance Officer for Engrail Therapeutics. Throughout her 30-plus year career, she has worked with numerous Fortune 100 pharmaceutical companies, including Pfizer, Merck, Lilly, and GlaxoSmithKline, and has held leadership positions at Novartis, Covance, Wyeth, and J&J. Przekop is the author of Six Sigma for Business Excellence and her latest book, 5-Star Career: Define and Build Yours Using the Science of Quality Management. 21. She earned a master's degree in quality systems engineering from Kennesaw State University, and she is a graduate of the Smith College Program for Women's Leadership and the Rutgers University Senior Leadership Program for Professional Women. Thank you so much for your time today, Penelope. We're very excited to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. This is one of my favorite topics. And before I start, I want to say thank you to Qualio for, you know, sponsoring this and also RAPS and giving me this opportunity to talk to everyone about this subject that is near and dear to my heart. So this is our agenda for the conversation today. We're going to talk about, you know, what is the underlying systemic issue that, you know, I believe, I mean, I'm 99% sure that exists in the industry that really has led to the mindset and, you know, myths and misconceptions about when companies should have a quality management system, and then, of course, an electronic system to support that. So then I'm going to, you know, go over what our goal is again, and, you know, how we will achieve that goal, and really what is my strategy for relaying this information, which does have to do with the root cause, right? So we'll go through that, and then I'll talk about some of the myths and things that I hear, and I'm sure Kelly hears all the time, and, you know, why they really are misconceptions, and then, you know, what can we do about that? All right, so as an overview, really for what we're here for today, as I mentioned, there's an underlying systemic issue in pharma in 2022, and this is what it is. Now, this is, you see here, required. Okay, by that I don't mean by regulators. I mean in the minds of everyone, right? In the minds of everyone doing this work. It's kind of a no-brainer now that we need to have validated electronic systems for what you see listed here. So clinical data management, edit checks, all of that, safety data capture and management, data capture to begin with at, investigator sites, our trial master file, medical records, GXP signatures, data query and verification, all of these things, regulatory reporting. For example, if you have a small company and you're building that, these are the kinds of systems that everybody doesn't think too much about anymore. So we have to have this. We would not do paper CRFs. We would not do a paper trial master file. So, if you could wrap your head around that, you'd think, yeah, okay, that would be crazy to say, I'm going to start a pharma company and I'm going to do all this on paper. Now, the issue is in 2022, an electronic quality management system is not a no-brainer, right? People don't think about it. They say, it's like a mindset thing. We don't need that. We don't need that yet. And this is an issue. And I'm going to share with you why this has, come to be an issue over the last 20 or 30 years, really. And so to do that, what I want to share with you is kind of, again, my strategy for how I'm going to relay this information to you, hopefully in a way that, you could look at it in a new light, right? So the goal in doing that is to help everyone understand why it's never too early to implement an electronic quality management system. So that's the goal. I want to convince you of that as best I can in an hour or so. So certainly there's a lot more detail and data and information that could go into this sort of case, if you will, that I'm going to make. But I only have a little over an hour, so I've condensed it down in a way that, I feel is very logical, and that I hope everyone can, wrap their heads around. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to leverage the science of quality management. And I'm going to ask that you temporarily shift your mindset while you listen to what I have to say. And I'm going to go through each of these now and kind of explain what I mean by this. So let's talk about the science of quality management. So this is actually a real STEM science. And this is actually one of the misconceptions or things that a lot of people don't know or don't fully embrace. But the science of quality management began as a business endeavor, if you will. It started in manufacturing of products, right? So, certainly thousands of years ago, whatever they were making, they wanted it to have good quality. They wanted someone else to want it, right? So in modern times, this science really was tied to, industrial equipment and, using math, right, to figure out how these things are going to work and how we're going to develop and build, an actual product that we envisioned, and we want it to be correct when it comes out at the end. We want it to be the product that our customers want. And so we want to be a successful business in that way. So it really became, over time, many years, the foundation for quality management systems in highly regulated industries. And there was just a whole, over many years, this science sort of became more and more powerful, in that Japan really used it to revolutionize and build back their economy after World War II. The US military and other military, other countries' military groups or what have you, embraced it in building, all the different things that they use. It became very prevalently used in high-risk industries such as aeronautics and the nuclear industry, and then it eventually made its way into the pharmaceutical industry on the manufacturing side. And this is all because of how powerful it is, right? So this is recognized, and the regulators who regulate these industries also embraced it, right? So this is why, you feel safe getting on an airplane. You don't mind living within, so many miles of a nuclear power plant, while you take your medications. So because it started with products, physical products, the pharma industry naturally took this on in manufacturing, right? So anyways, over the years, it has seeped out into, services and other kinds of deliverables, if you will, because people said, wow, this really works. We're going to use this science to be successful in our businesses. And so my point is, it wasn't created by, the FDA or the QA department, to make sure that we're all compliant. It was initially a business, it came out of business, right? But it was so successful in creating quality that it made sense for it to come toward these really risky industries, right? Okay, so I want you to keep that in mind, and I want you to also realize that the science of quality management includes this quality event and CAPA management piece, right? That many of you are, you're probably familiar with. So we're going to use that piece to actually look at our issue, right? The issue that we're here to talk about today. All right. And this is just real high level, the quality event and CAPA management process. So, you identify an issue, like a independent issue, not a trend, just issue somewhere, something happens. You investigate it to, confirm, okay, it's really truly an issue. Then you look into what is the root cause of the issue. And, I could do a whole training on this, in the science of quality management, you cannot, or you should not just say, well, it's Jim's fault, he pushed the wrong button, right? Because that doesn't help, right? It ultimately doesn't matter whose fault it was. What you want to find out is, why it happened, because even just in life, and this is kind of what my new book is about, sometimes it is somebody's fault or some group's fault, but that doesn't help you. You have to figure out what you're going to do about it, right? What's within your power, your system to make this better. So once you do that, you decide, okay, what are the corrective and preventative actions that I can take or my company can take, not that the person I'm blaming can take, because you can't force them to do anything, right? It's within your system. or your scope of control. Okay, so hopefully you want to do that and be successful. Along with that, in the science of quality management, it's been proven that if you trend, look at all these issues over time, you look for trends, you would be able to possibly, hopefully, identify a systemic issue, right? An issue that, for example, if there's an issue with one product or one report or whatever, you're going to fix that. But you could potentially see that, oh, we're having the same problem with every product, every report. And then that really is a systemic issue. And you can sort of go back to step one and go through this at a much sort of broader perspective and really make real change, right? All right, so with that said, I just want to go to the next sort of thing I want you to do, and I've touched on this, is our mindset. So everyone here today, probably, I'm 99% sure, whether you've been in the industry a year or 20 years, we know, we're taught, if you will, that we always need to keep patient safety and data integrity first, top of mind when we make decisions, when we look at risk, all of these things. And that is what we should do. So, but today, for right now, I'm going to ask you to kind of shift your mindset and put on a business hat, right? So, just like I said, quality management really came out of, business, right? So this actually it's taken me a few years to even, sometimes feel comfortable to say, okay, it's okay for me to think about this in a business perspective. And actually, we need to do both because patient safety and data integrity is our business, right? We are companies who, hung the flag out and said, this is going to be my job. Like, I'm going to make a salary because I care about this and I'm interested in this. And, I want to spend my time doing things that help patient safety. And to do that, I must have data integrity. But of course, I have to be successful. My business needs to be successful. I need to make my salary so I can take care of my family. We cannot ignore that, right? So just for a minute, I want you to put on your business hat. And we're going to look into identifying the root cause, again, of this systemic issue of really basically everybody thinking we don't need a QMS, or for that matter, an electronic QMS right now or yet, so let's look into that. All right, so to do that, we're going to say, look at the history. So how did we get here? So what you see here, there's a lot on this slide. This is basically my career, right? So my personal experience in over 30 years, actually started my career in 1988, doing research at a university, and we were doing research in collaboration with pharma companies, right? So in 1990, 1991, I got my first job in pharma at a big pharma company. It was Herbst Roussel. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was definitely, big pharma. So I worked in the lab. We used paper. We had a shared computer for computing, right? So by that, I mean, we had a shared computer in the lab that we would sit down and, it just looked really weird and we'd put numbers in and, we used it for that sort of thing. We didn't have any email. We had interoffice mail, okay? So by 1995, at the same company, I had moved into regulatory affairs in a quality assurance / regulatory affairs role in the same company. And by then I had a desktop computer. I got a few emails. I would get like 4, right? And I would print them out and sit them on my desk. It's like, this is my to-do pile. And that's just how it was. You know, we did audits. I did all kinds of work. It was all paper, right? We did start to use, trying to think, very, maybe Microsoft Word. I don't even know if we had that. So then, you know, as we got close to, you know, a few years out, we started hearing rumblings about outsourcing, right? So a lot of it was India. So India can process data at a very low cost. And so the company is thinking about outsourcing sort of data processing activities, right, to India. That was like a big rumor, right? So that by 2000, okay, so now I'm at another company, one of the earlier CROs. By then I had a laptop. By then a lot of monitoring was being outsourced along with the data processing. There were a lot of rumors about electronic CRFs. Everybody's like, oh, what's that? You know, we had double data entry. Everything was paper. I mean, we used computers and software, Microsoft Word, stuff like that, but things had to be printed out. You know, it was paper. All right, so around 2000, or moving into the 2000s, this is what I really consider a period of sort of the rise of the vendors, right? And also the technological revolution. This happened all in the same, if you think about it, the same time span, right, for us. So for example, by 2008, I had a cell phone. I was working at, well, between 2000 and 2008, I was at Johnson & Johnson. We had homegrown electronic systems, and validation became a big thing. There were a lot of homegrown systems, but you know, the vendors were sort of realizing, well, if I have the system, I can get the business. They won't have to grow the system. They don't have to validate, you know, I'll help them do it. And it's good business, right? So that really took off. And by 2012, I would say, and again, this is not, you know, this is kind of just, you know, how I experienced this, but I do know it to be true. So by 2012, electronic systems were pretty much everywhere, right? And then as you move forward now, again, it's sort of like a no-brainer. We're going to have electronic data capture. We're going to have electronic TMF. We're going to have electronic safety database. We're going to submit to the FDA electronically. You know, all of these things that we have to have that. Yet we're still sitting around saying, well, we don't need an electronic quality management system. And do we even need a quality management system yet? So it's like, it's really something that fell through the cracks, right? So let's talk about more of why it fell through the cracks. So to do that, first I want to talk about, you know, why did pharma embrace electronic systems? You know, and again, you probably think, well, of course we did. It makes sense. You know, it made our processes more efficient. It was reliable in terms of, you know, taking out some human error. And of course, if the system is validated, we know it's, you know, secure and reliable. It's faster, things are faster. We can access the information all over the world or between our company sites and locations. You know, it was a cultural thing too, because again, this was all happening at home, right, too. We're getting cell phones and laptops and all that. So all of this made it very accommodating and cost effective. So to the point where, you know, it was a transition. You know, I remember there were several years there when we would ask, you know, do you use paper CRFs or do you have electronic system? Or, you know, how do you submit to the FDA? You know, now, I mean, I don't even ask that. You know, if someone had paper, I guess, you know, I'd find out. But so with that in mind, remember, we're going to put our business hats on, okay? And since forever, right, on the business side, we want to increase the speed to market, right, of what we're doing. We don't want to, we don't want to slow down. We got to speed up because we're going to be more financially successful that way. And we want to reduce the cost of drug development because, of course, we don't want to waste money, right? This is good, makes good business sense. So embracing technology was good business sense, based on all those things I just mentioned. And outsourcing turned out to help us, right? Because we could, at least, definitely at the beginning, we could, and now I'm sure we can spend less money outsourcing these things, right? So we're going to follow the money, all right? So if you look here at the picture with the medications, at the beginning, when Big Pharma got this idea, we're going to outsource. Of course, vendors, they got their business hat on. They're like, wow, this is a business opportunity. I'm going to generate revenue and I'm going to help pharma cut costs. This is wonderful. Everybody's so happy. So as time went on, the vendors expanded services and united. So they said, all these little vendors, at first it was just data management, a lot of monitoring, then it became everything over time, because smart people said, I'm gonna open a business to be a vendor for pharma, or I am a vendor, I'm gonna expand my services. Then what happened is, just like in the pharma industry, these companies started to merge and buy each other. And, so then we get the bigger and bigger vendors with the full service capabilities, right? And part of that whole thing was also vendors saying, wow, I can build the electronic tools. I want the business. I need to have these things to offer these customers, right? And pharma is like, oh, this is wonderful. We'll do it. All right. So now you see here on the, the stairway, there's vendors that can just about do everything, right? They can run a clinical trial. They can submit. They can develop, they can do the lab work. They can develop your, do your CMC work. They can do your manufacturing. They can do your data management, medical writing, regulatory, everything, right? So before I show you that crazy slide, I'm just going to go back to here. So what I just described really happened between, the late 90s and 2012, and then it just took off, right? So at the same time, and I'm going to show you my crazy slide. This is my, it's crazy, but I really like it because it really shows visually what I just described. So in the middle here, you see 1998, you see the timeline, right? It goes to 2021 because I made this last year. So you see the experts in 1998 were Big Pharma. Then you see the little vendors cropping up, the vendors, more vendors, more vendors, more vendors. 2017, okay, now we have expert vendors, right? That's at the top. At the bottom, toward the middle, this road here, the new road, these are all the people that started to realize, whether on their own or through this sort of vendor revolution, outreach, that we can provide a service. These people at the bottom, you see sort of academia, all kinds of, startup companies said, wow, we can be in the pharma business because we can rely on these vendors to do these things that we're not experts at, right? So by 2021, here you see We have a combination of a tremendous amount of small to medium biotech pharma companies, and this is across the different types of products, right? Devices. Even now we have, electronic medical devices. We have, of course, the standard pharma products, medications, vaccines, biologics, all of this. And it's wonderful, right, for healthcare. But all these companies are relying on these vendors now. And we still, of course, have big pharma as well. So in all of this, there was a glitch. The glitch was that the regulations have not changed in that sponsors are required to have their own quality systems. So when you think about, and I don't mean electronic, I mean just the system, like, SOPs, training, quality event processes, all these kind of things. Sponsors have to have that, right? So also the sponsor is the entity that's going to be inspected by the FDA, and they are ultimately responsible. Now, most big pharma companies have known this, right? They knew it when they first said, oh, let's outsource something. So they knew it. However, the other issue, the other piece of this is that literally around the early 90s was when the quality assurance field was developing. That's right around, I remember when I was at that first company, I helped my boss, who was a director of QA, do a QC review of some of the original ICH wording, right? The very first thing. And when I look back, I just think, wow, that's amazing. So that was growing. QA at that time was kind of, sometimes the people were kind of thought of as the company police, which QA has come a very long way to not really be thought of that way as much as we used to. But it's almost like the QA field was developing at the same time all that was happening, right? So it's almost like somebody forgot to tell everyone, this is a piece too that you must have as a company, as a pharma company. And what happened is the vendors wanted the business. So they said, well, we got to show them that we have SOPs and we have this and we have that. Like there was a time when I really kind of saw like some of these big CROs were more on top of this than the actual pharma companies that were paying me to go and qualify the vendors. And I thought something is wrong with this picture, So a lot of these companies that popped up, they just are very reliant on the vendors. Anyways, so hopefully this has been enough to really kind of show you how this really has happened and brought us to this place where there's a big piece of the puzzle missing in the mindset, right? The quality management system, meaning not electronic, just the pieces of this process and system, is really the activities and processes that ensure patient safety, data integrity, and regulatory compliance. And it's like building a home, right? You wouldn't build your whole home and say, well, I don't need to worry about the foundation yet. I'm going to do that later and it'll be fine, and I probably just will pour some concrete in the corners and everything looks beautiful and it'll be fine. And it'll be easy. And, I can do it. I know the regulations, well, that wouldn't work, right? Would you want to take your family in there? Would you want to would you want to get on an airplane that, didn't sort of do things in the logical order to make sure that you're going to be safe, right? Well, the industry's moving toward the place where we're going to be asking people to take medications that were developed without this foundation. And it's very, very concerning to me. And, I'm not dramatic person, but for me and many that do the type of work that I do, we see it because we are going across the industry to all these different places. And I actually, you know, am one of the, I mean, I'm confident to say few highly experienced people across GXPs, and I do a lot of work in the different areas, and I see it. So it concerns me. And the QMS, you know, creates that foundation, but it also eventually produces the documentation to show that you had the foundation, you did this right? You did this the way it's supposed to be done to ensure quality. So it's definitely a missing piece. It should not be like on the side, right? So the news flash is an electronic quality management system does all of the things or adds all of the benefits that we talked about for all those other systems, right? It helps you to be efficient. It helps you to be reliable in what you're doing, to be, so much faster. It allows your company to have accessibility to all of the documentation that you need, and it is cost efficient and it's secure. So this is what people don't seem to, you know, understand. So what we'll do now is, okay, hopefully I've given you a lot to think about. And with the business hat, what I was trying to show is that it's good business to have and to get an electronic quality management system. We always think of the QMS as part of, you know, QA and all of these things, but, and, you know, just, we need to have it for compliance, but we need to have it for good business, okay? Because we're trying to develop products and we need them to satisfy our customer. And part of that is that they have to be safe, they have to be effective. We need for what we're saying to the FDA, to the world, to be correct and reliable. And that's what the QMS is for. So the QMS, the system overall, and then just like you have to have a trial master file, so, you know, you need it. So why would you not have it electronically? It's, to me, it just doesn't make sense. So now I want to talk about, just doing a time check for myself. I think I'm okay. I want to talk about the misconceptions. So these are things that I hear all the time, like literally, if not every day, every week. So I want to have about 7 or 8 of these that, you know, I've tried to kind of put them in buckets so that, you know, I can discuss them with you that way. So I hear our CRO has an eQMS, you know, and that's kind of like we outsource almost everything. We don't need that. Our CRO has that. We follow our CRO's SOPs. Okay, well, that's great if they have one, they need one, but they need a QMS and they've chosen to have an electronic QMS. But pharma companies also need a quality management system. And again, this is part of the confusion too. You know, there's a quality management system like that you could do on paper or with a Microsoft Word document. And then there's the electronic, right? So think of TMF and paper cabinets or even electronic documents, you know, a Word PDF of your protocol versus the electronic TMF system. So you kind of, you know, make sure you understand that. So pharma companies need to also have quality management system. So if you have employees, the regulations say that, you know, your employees must be qualified for what they are doing. So they need to have their training on, protocol, whatever, on the regulations, all of those things. They need to have their CVs and job descriptions and all of that. And your company must maintain oversight. So you've got to qualify your vendors. You've got to have a ongoing vendor qualification program. You, may or may not be at the point where you want to do internal audits, but eventually as you grow, you would want to do that. You must have a process to address, escalate, take care of any quality issues. All of these things, you're going to have to facilitate an inspection. You have to have the right auditors, and people say, well, I outsource auditing. Well, okay, how did you do that? It's your processes. You have to document the processes that you're using to basically run a pharma company, in terms of the drug development or marketing, right? On the other side, pharma companies, like any company, need to have really good financial processes. You could have financial audits. You might be trying to raise money, have investments in your company. You might be planning to sell your company. Well, you need to have all this documentation for all of those purposes. And a QMS, again, it started with business. It's not, people think of it as like, well, that's just for GXP stuff. I don't need to I don't need to have a process for anything else. Well, it's good business to have processes, right? And you want to have documentation. You want everybody to do everything consistently. So this is something that you need. Now, if you're a small company just starting out, true, you don't need as many processes as a huge company or a company who's doing your, everything in-house, of course, but you still need it. So then the next thing is, well, we'll get to the cost, but I want to talk a little bit about, we hear, well, we don't use paper, so we're fine. We don't use paper. Our SOPs are, Word documents, or, we have them in Teams or, SharePoint, and, we have training in SharePoint. And, the thing is, that's not horrible, when you're starting out, but the problem is that it gets to be unmanageable, and it's very dicey. It gets to be very dicey in terms of, do you have the proper controls, right? So a lot of people, I come into a lot of companies, help them establish their initial QMS, and they say, well, we want you to do this, but we don't need an electronic system. It may be in a couple years. So we are going to establish our quality system, and we want to do it electronically. We don't want to use paper because we're in different locations, and that's just too hard. So, I have to try to help them figure out a way to do this. It's sort of like you're cobbling together something that hopefully is fine. And the dangerous thing is, I've been doing this for 30 years, so I feel confident in those scenarios to help people make the right decisions. But a lot of companies are hiring quality assurance consultants and people who maybe don't have the right skill set or don't have as many years experience. And, it's just very, you're taking a lot of risk. It's very important to have the right person to help you, but it just gets out of control, and then it's harder to control. Trust me, it's so much harder. And then they say, well, we want you to set this up, but people don't realize, well, then you've got to manage it, and who's going to manage it? And people say, well, we don't need a quality person yet. So we don't need a quality person yet because, we're not to phase 3 yet or whatever. So it's just, it gets, a little bit crazy. So the next thing is, well, it costs too much. Okay, so we're going out getting investments, millions of dollars to have a pharma company, but we've got to have the electronic, TMF. We've got to have electronic data capture. We're going to pay vendors. We're only choosing ones that have those systems, because they're going to help us. But it costs too much to have our own quality management systems, in terms of, we don't want to hire a QA person yet. We don't want to, we just want to cobble this together, but people believe it's okay and it's good. And I'm not saying everybody's going to get thrown in jail or something by the FDA. I'm just saying, from a business perspective, it does not make sense. It's not logical. So it's been very hard for quality assurance people and compliance to get this message across, because of this whole historical thing that I've shown you, and the gap that this fell through. The mindset is just not, there's so many blind spots. So the reality is now, especially, there are so many different electronic QMSs that you can turn to. And of course, one of them is Qualio. That's that is my favorite, really, for small and medium-sized companies. And these systems are affordable, right? Everybody thinks about some of the really, really big systems that, have been around for a while, and they are very expensive. And so, that's fine. You should look at different systems and choose the system that you want based on cost and what it does for you, and your experience with those companies. But nobody should be saying it costs millions of dollars and it costs too much. This can fit into budgets, okay? And it is worth the cost, because I keep thinking one day I'm just going to take a month off and really do the math and figure out. But when you look at paying consultants, paying people to manage these things outside of a system, when you think of the cost of not having it, and then all of a sudden, I've seen companies getting ready, they're a year out from their submission or something. They're already in phase 3 and they're like, okay, we need to have some SOPs. And it is very difficult to create that at that point. And it's not just SOPs, it's, have you been qualifying your vendors and have all this done? Have you, the training, just because you're using vendors doesn't mean that your staff doesn't have to be trained. You still need to train people in-house. They theoretically are supposed to be qualified to oversee these vendors and keep an eye on them and make sure, they're doing the right thing. And this is a problem in the industry too, in that, some of these new pharma companies, the people, they're saying like, well, the FDA or EMA wants me to oversee this huge vendor that I want to pay to do this for me, because I don't have the expertise, but I have to make sure that they're doing it right. Okay, well, yes. And if you have a quality management system, that is how you're going to set yourself up to do it. And also is why I tell companies, you should have a quality and compliance person at the seat at the very beginning, right? When somebody starts a company and they say, well, we're going to have a CEO, we're going to have a chief operations officer, we're going to have, chief medical officer, we're going to have chief or, VP of manufacturing. Nobody ever says at the beginning, we're going to have a chief compliance officer, or we're going to have a chief quality officer, or we're going to have a VP of quality, because we need that perspective at the table. And that is what is missing. And all of this needs to happen at the beginning. And this is very important for business, for your business. It's important for the community at large, because the industry is changing, and this gap needs to be addressed so that we don't continue down this road. So then we come to this, well, these SOPs or me training on this, it really doesn't have a direct impact with patient safety. The TMF and our monitoring and our data capture do, because that's the data. That's really, or we're going to have, of course, electronic data safety database, because we have to make sure that's right, because that's patient safety, and we have to have, all that data. The data has to have integrity. Well, data integrity, of course, is a huge component of ensuring patient safety in terms of what our ultimate conclusions, is this product safe? Is the safety profile, effective? Is the safety profile acceptable? And then be able to share that, get it approved, and say that to people, who are going to literally rely on this for their health. But it's just like the foundation of the home. Like, there's a lot more to patient safety, short-term and long-term, in that our industry needs to be solid, right? Our industry needs to have that underlying framework that all of the things that we do are built upon. All of the things I just mentioned, like safety, data management, monitoring. The quality management system is the piece that really ties all that together and makes sure that, these monitors are qualified and they have a good process and they're following it. And, our systems are validated, and, it's the backbone, the bone structure of all of that. And that's really starting to crumble, and we don't want that to happen. So, my biggest point here is that first, everyone needs to understand that you need a quality management system, right? Meaning not the electronic system, the actual processes, people, mindset. Then once you realize that, you see, oh, well, of course I want it to be electronic. Why would I do all that on paper? Why would I do all that, through just sharing Word documents and PDFs? And, because ultimately, it's very tricky, because if you're using an electronic file, let's say, for a document, and you don't have paper, or you have paper and you're scanning it in, the paper, the original, is still inspectable. You have to think about, where is that original, and what were the signatures? How'd you get those signatures? And, just all these questions. So having an electronic system at the get-go sets you right up. To me, it's so like, oh, breath of fresh air. I can start with this and build it. And then again, it's such good business sense, makes business sense, because as you grow your company, you want to have all that established to grow it using that system. And that is how you're going to make sure that everything stays healthy and compliant, and everybody knows what to do. And, literally, you could be inspection ready every day. And that is really what regulators expect. And that's another topic I talk about a lot, is, it's so exciting that in the last 5 or 8 years, companies have really gotten more into inspection readiness, having mock inspections. But you know what? We shouldn't even have to do that, right? Or it should be much less of an activity, because everything should be built logically. If you build things logically, then you're going to be ready, right? So that's my really big message here. So I think we're going to have plenty of time for discussion, which is great. So I have a few more slides, and then we'll go to, I do see there's a lot of questions. So So my call to action again is, just hopefully that this has helped you to realize that it's not too early, it's not too expensive, it's not a nice to have. We need this in our industry, and you need it in your company, a QMS, and it makes sense that it would be electronic, just like every other system that you need to have. And really, it should be the first system that you implement, not the last, right? Because, literally, if you're going to start R&D activities, you're supposed to have processes, you're supposed to know everybody's qualified. And so this would be the first step, right? Okay, so how can we move forward? My dream, my hope for the industry is that the eQMS joins the list, right, of the must-haves. And I hope you guys know what I mean. Like, people would just be like, what? You're going to use paper CRFs? That just would be like mind-boggling. That's the way we should think about these electronic quality management systems. And that's really what I hope to relay here today. All right, so thank you very much. We'll go into questions, but I do want to say, this is my contact information. If anybody, has a question later, wants to reach out to me, I'm plugging my book here. There's a picture of it. I won't really talk about it, but if you want to check that out, it's, of course, you can find on Amazon or wherever. And now I think we're going to, I think that was my last slide. We're going to start a conversation, and Kelly is going to lead us in that. I am going to, I think, stop sharing and open up there's chat and there's Q&A. So I think Kelly,
it's conversation's been happening in Q&A, so we'll just I've answered a few in there directly, and thank you again, Penelope, for your time and for your presentation. We all appreciate it. At the beginning, we were asked if we were going to refer to med device systems as well, or only pharma. I did answer that one in chat, in that the quality system elements are the same here. That while we talk specifically to pharma in this, I wouldn't answer these questions any differently if it were med device. So Penelope, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I want to say medical devices have been ahead, really, in that in manufacturing, this all came out much earlier. I started to hear about, Six Sigma and all of this stuff back in the late 90s. And I heard about it at I think a DIA conference, where I went to a talk about devices or something. And I was really excited about it, and back then I couldn't get permission I wanted to get Six Sigma training. And I was just kind of said, oh, that doesn't have anything to do with us, and I was like, oh, that didn't make sense. And anyways, eventually I went and got a master's in quality systems engineering. So that was better than my getting a Six Sigma black belt. But yes, absolutely. And one of the things with the electronic quality systems is I find that, and this is just a general comment, a lot of those companies are sort of set up more to be for manufacturing and devices, and are moving now to try to be more in tune with R&D and clinical and all of that. So that's good news.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with you too. I think device has historically been a little more flexible here, and I think it's just some differences in the industry and how they approach regulations in general. So it's been, as someone who spent half my career in device and half my career in drug, it's been good to see drug finally starting to kind of catch up and think about these things a little bit differently than they have in the past, because they really can be a lot more efficient, as you talked about earlier. All right, let's see. So I answered this one in the Q&A, but Penelope, we can chat about this. Is there any predefined guidance for revalidation of an eQMS? What is the frequency for revalidation? And the answer I gave is that there is not a predefined schedule here. There's no magic number. It is dependent on the tool that you're using. How often is it changing? You know, in this world where, you know, again, so Qualio is a cloud-based software as a service application. We are changing frequently. We do bug fixes. We do all of those kinds of things in real time because we believe that it's a bigger risk to you, the customer, if we hold those patches for some set period of time than to just go ahead and deploy them in real time. And our basis for that is the fact that we are following a software development lifecycle agile model, and we are testing every time. We have automated testing tools that run and test the entire application with every deployment. Now, what does that mean for you as the customer? Is that your processes need to be set up with some flexibility, with some ability to accommodate these changes as they come through. And, you know, we expect that you audit us, that you understand our change management process, how we go about performing the testing that we do, because we're really doing what is equivalent to your installation and operational qualifications for you. And why you would repeat that, there's no value there. And there is no regulatory expectation there either, to be clear. I think we have a whole lot of sort of interpretive dance around what we call validation in the electronic QMS world.
Right.
And I'd be happy to, I could probably spend a whole nother hour talking about that. So I'll stop right there. But
yeah, I really want to, Kelly, I really want to answer this anonymous question here. I don't know if you answered that one. But the person is saying, you know, I mean, I think everybody can read it. I don't know. The person's under the impression that since this is being at least partly advertised by RAPS, that everyone here already knows that an internal quality management system is a requirement. So why spend so much time trying to convince people? Okay, well, everybody does not know that. I mean, I'm just saying, it's just not true. I mean, we did and I don't know, you know, that's why I had the polls, because I wanted to see how many years people had been in the industry. I wanted to see, you know, what level you're at. And if you saw the poll on, do you have a quality eQMS now, it was about 50%. I think 40% said yes. And then between no and I don't know, it was about half. So I don't think we can assume that everybody on this call knows in their guts, in their mindset, that this is as important as having these other processes and systems. And I have not seen it across the industry that everybody knows that. So, and again, my point was, you know, one of my pet peeves, I guess, is the fact that it's called quality management system and then it's eQMS. So system is a confusing word, right? There's an electronic system, but then the definition of a system in anything is all the pieces of, you know, what you're doing in this system. So people get confused about that. So I really believe that if people truly understand that, you know, the system is needed, it makes logical sense that you would want it to be electronic. So that's my point. And Kelly, I mean, do you agree with my, you know, everybody may not agree, but I mean, do you agree with my logic there? Or
yeah, absolutely. And I do think some clarification there, you know, quality management systems, quality management in general, you know, I think, and it's interesting to me too, I think sometimes, you know, we've on the device side of the world, you know, we called it our QMS, our quality management system, for a long time. On the pharma side, I don't think people always thought of it that way. So then when electronic QMS, eQMS came on the market, there is some confusion there. What are you talking? Are you talking about the tool? Are you talking about the processes? Is that interchangeable? You know, and so yes,
this is kind of
another.
It's another piece of that root cause for how this has fallen through the cracks, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely would agree with that. So there's a couple questions in here about advising on the validation of an eQMS. Can you share the V model? We don't have time. That's a whole conversation in and of itself. What I can say is please go check out ISPE GAMP. And also check out their new good practice guide they just published in November of last year. So this is pretty new for us. It's called Enabling Innovation. And it really kind of tosses the whole V model on its head, as it should. V model is very useful and applicable to things like manufacturing equipment and those kinds of things. But your electronic quality management system tool is not your manufacturing processes. And so just blindly applying the same methodologies is not useful or value added, especially in the case where we were talking about a minute ago, where you're going with a cloud-based SaaS provider who's already doing all this testing for you. Is that acceptable to regulators? Well, when I was doing equipment manufacturing support as a validation engineer once upon a time, more years ago than I care to count, probably responsible for a few of these gray hairs, we used to hire the vendors to come in and execute those protocols, because they're the system experts. So having your vendor provide a validation package that you then review through the filtered lens of your intended use of the system, then absolutely it's acceptable to accept a vendor's validation of the system and document the places where you have set up certain workflows or processes for your own, that's our intended use. It's how we have configured the CAPA workflow, for example. So I think hopefully, you're welcome, Bharat. I appreciate the questions you're asking. Thank you very much. Let's see. Penelope, a couple people popped in partway through and really wanted to know, how do we evaluate a good eQMS system? How do we determine what's a good system out there?
Right. Well, I mean, that's tricky. That's again why you need to have someone who's experienced and basically a quality assurance and compliance professional in your company or on your side, to help you look at those things, because of course any again, it's business. Any company that has a system to offer you, they want to put their best foot forward, and they're going to tell you, as you'd want them to, what their system does and the capabilities and all of that. But I have also seen, and this isn't specific to any eQMS company, but sometimes those people don't, they don't all necessarily have 30 years of experience, or 20 or whatever. So, I think it's a different topic. I didn't cover, exactly all the components that should be in the QMS and how you would pick one. It's actually I think a very good topic for another webinar, to go through that and say, what should I be looking for? And what are the questions that I should be asking? I've had eQMS people say things to me that I knew were not correct, like from a regulatory compliance perspective. And I know, it's kind of, Kelly's probably like, oh, don't say that, but I'm not saying it's qualia. It's just, I'm being honest, like
there's a lot out there.
To make sure that
they're a mixed bag for sure.
And this is why companies, sometimes when you don't hire a quality person until much later, sometimes the wrong type of person gets hired in terms of, quality assurance and compliance is a big thing, across GXPs, and you want to have the right people, you want to have the right system. So, there's a lot of people that are highly experienced in other areas and, highly intelligent that are feeling like, well, I can pick that. You know what I mean? And it's not, and I don't mean it's insult or anything. It's just, we need, and I'm biased, but we need to give the quality assurance and compliance profession more clout and respect, I think, in all of this. And it's another concerning thing because I see down the line that we may not have enough people that have the expertise to help pharma. So again, I don't mean to be like a sound dramatic, but I feel strongly about the things that I'm saying because I've lived it and I do it every day. And you know, I hope that just like I do when I'm auditing or doing a mock inspection, like I might be telling you things that you don't love to hear or sound a little concerning, but that's my job. So I view it as I'm helping. I want to help. So
definitely, I view it that way too. And a good QA person, I can't emphasize this enough because we run into it all the time. A good QA person can balance the regulatory requirements with the needs of the business.
right.
They do see that from a bigger picture perspective, not just the, well, in the blue sky perfect world, this is how quality works. Those aren't good partners, especially if you're in that early phase development or in the startup space. You need to have some flexibility in your thinking, or QA is just going to be painful for you. Space.
Yeah, true.
So yeah, and I there's an interesting comment in here. Penelope Brid has pointed out that I would go even further and include business sector for marketing claims, patient resource information. When you're evaluating that QMS and considering what is it that we need this tool to do, the good tools are going to grow with you. So if you look at all of the processes in that big picture perspective, absolutely there are elements you need early, or if you're still back in the clinical phases, that you like complaint handling. You're not going to do complaints until you're commercial. But will the system accommodate that when you get there so that you don't have to, you know, migrate to another system partway through? Because that is just as disruptive as going from paper to eQMS, is going from one eQMS to another eQMS, right? You're trying to do all of this in ways that are efficient and minimize the disruptions to your business. So absolutely, the first step in evaluating a system is determining what is it that you need. And that those needs can evolve as you start to shop and you start to realize what, you know, oh, look here, this system has these features and this system has these other features. And so it should be a bit of a living document as you go through that whole process of evaluation.
Yeah, and I see Michelle here is asking about the validation package from Qualio, and I just want to speak to that because I did go through validating Qualio with one of my clients recently, and we did use the validation package from Qualio, and we found it really easy. I mean, you know, certainly it was new, you know, I didn't do the validation. My client did it. And then I was kind of helping him from QA perspective, and then, you know, doing the QA review and sign off and all of that. But there's a step-by-step instructions, like the person who did it, like he had to follow step-by-step instructions. He actually liked doing it because it really taught him so much about the system, right? So now he feels like within the company, he has, you know, he's not a QA expert, but he has the expertise on the system, at least more than anybody else there. And yeah, I think he just did it by himself. And this is very early, right? We started very early. So it took him, I think, maybe a couple of weeks, you know, not 40 hours a week, but about a couple of weeks to do it. Then I had to go through everything. So, you know, it really didn't take us. Now, we didn't also, after we validated, we did have to spend time working on, you know, Qualio put in some SOP drafts that we had, and we had to go back in and work on those a little bit. But, you know, it was very successful, and we were really happy with it.
Right, that's good to hear. Let's see, I think we have a few more minutes. There's a question in here about ISO standards. So 45001 and 14001, environmental and occupational. And I guess I'm not entirely sure I understand exactly what you're asking, but if I can speak from a high level perspective for QMS in general, so quality systems in general, All ISO standards are based on ISO 9001, which is the general QMS quality management system for all industries, does not matter. And then the various flavors that come out of that, like 13485 for medical device, 45001 for environmental and occupational standards. Where those ISO standards differ is in the operational sections. So it's usually 6 and 7, I think chapter 6 and 7 of those standards. Those are areas where you'll get fairly specific based on industry, but all the rest of the quality system elements are the same. It does not matter which ISO standard we're talking about. They all require dock control, training, management, oversight, and review processes, some internal auditing for your own continuous improvement, all of those kinds of things. Customer feedback processes, complaint processes, all of those processes are the same no matter what industry you're talking about. So to that end, would an eQMS help you? Absolutely. Absolutely. And then what you want to look for is a tool that has some flexibility around how you execute those processes, because something that is absolutely purpose-built only makes sense. You may not do deviation laboratory OS the same way they do, for example, and a very purpose-built rigid system is going to be fixed for some of those processes. So you want to find a flexible system that has the core foundational elements to comply to any of those standards, but then you can go through your particular operational elements and you can customize those to your own needs. So I hope that answers your question. And I'd be happy to take that one offline for further discussion. If you would like, again, feel free to reach out to us after the webinar. All right, so that's that question. What other questions? We've still got them popping in here, Penelope, so let's see.
Yeah, there's one about vendors using eQMS. So yeah, it would be for the same, right? The vendor also is required to have their, SOPs, training, qualified people, CAPA management. It's the same. And this is why a lot of smaller companies it's evolved to where they feel like, well, if the CRO has that, we don't need it. But everybody needs a quality management system. And then if you're going to choose an electronic one, again, that's the logical thing to do in 2022. Now, the question about what kind of training can we get our QA to help them be qualified? I'm not sure. You mean qualified in general or qualified to choose a QMS? Or I'm not sure what. I'm not sure how to answer that.
Yeah, I was looking at that one too, and I wasn't real sure. If that was your question, if you wouldn't mind maybe popping in some clarification. Oh, to choose an eQMS. Thank you, Jennifer.
That's tough.
That's a tough one. I would not put my brand new, fresh out of school dock control specialist on the selection, in charge of the selection project. That's where I would start. I think sometimes we have this idea that there's a class for everything. There's got to be a class for this. There really kind of isn't. Some of these things come with experience, time in the saddle, school of hard knocks. You've done it and seen it done well. You've done it and seen it done horribly. And frankly, that's why, folks like Penelope and I are trying to get on these webinars and talk to you guys to kind of help share some of our experience and knowledge there. I think maybe this is another opportunity. Somebody asked earlier, how do we select an eQMS? We could spend a whole webinar on that. How do you implement an eQMS? There's another good topic, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the work to get ready, if you want it to go well, that work starts before you ever select a vendor.
Right.
You've got to understand, what processes do you have in place now? What processes do you think you're going to need in the future? Who are the stakeholders of those processes? Make sure those folks are heard as you go through this. And then, from there.
Yeah, and this is why I do talk about companies involving QA and compliance professionals early on, because there's so much more to it than some people realize. And again, it's not knocking anybody else's experience. I mean, I couldn't, go and run certain things. You know what I mean? Like, it's sort of like, it's just a missing link or piece of the puzzle that you do need. But I would say too, though, the greatest thing you can do for your QA folks is to help them get more training on just generally, the regulations, the publicly available information from FDA inspections. And the more they know about their own field, they're going to do better at choosing an electronic system. So that, coupled, of course, with, I absolutely agree with all of what Kelly said.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, and I think too, one of the other things to kind of tag into the question you were trying to answer there about how vendors should or could use an eQMS. Is it similar to how it's used by sponsors? Absolutely. You should be selecting vendors who have quality processes in place. Now, and that's, so again, like, for example, we are a software company. We are not a pharmaceutical company. We are not a medical device company, but we have a quality system in place. We operate under ISO 9001. And again, back to my earlier statements about how all of these quality system regulations have the same fundamental requirements. If you understand that and look at it from that perspective, then it becomes easier to understand, again, you want to have vendors who are doing quality, have quality built into their operations. What does that look like? For us, it looks like an ISO 9001 certification, right? Now, it does not look like a 13485 certification because we don't make medical devices, but our software is used by hundreds of companies who market medical devices, hundreds more who market pharma, right? So I think making sure that, and if they're using an electronic quality system, well, great. It's that much easier to audit them. You don't have to go look at all their paper, right? So,
right. And I would just say,
yeah,
from a business perspective and a quality and compliance perspective, you want to pick vendors too that have a sound, solid business, right? You're going to rely on them. I mean, just like when a company gets audited or inspected and you look at, sort of the low-hanging fruit, like job descriptions and CVs, if they're all terrible or they can't even be provided, I mean, everything else could be great, but it gives this impression of, do these people know, what they're doing, or do they produce good quality? So, I mean, I would always hope, even because I'm saying this because a lot of vendors are, like Kelly said, they're maybe not doing, they're only doing a piece of the GXP puzzle or whatever, but always having a quality management system should, that should be happening. And then of course, if they have electronic system, it's just, again, makes common sense, and it's easier to work with them.
Yep.
That's one of the things.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. They should speak a common language,
exactly.
and not have to do too much interpretation in the back and forth that you have with them.
Sharing. I mean, now, even before COVID, everybody's in different locations. Well, now there's companies where everybody's literally just working at home. Everybody has. I just don't see. It's really hard for me to understand why people wouldn't realize how logical and easier it is if you have an electronic system.
Yes, absolutely. Their question related to that whole selection process: does it help to define the user requirement specification that the QMS processes needed prior to selecting your eQMS? Absolutely, with the caveat that no vendor is going to meet 100%. So part of going through the RFP, and for me, and with the more successful projects I've seen in the past, you have your idea of what your needs are up front. You will have a process that weighs the responses of the various vendors to what does our software do. And some of them may just respond to you with, well, here's our user needs list, right? They may not, and it's okay. You need to understand if they've got, thousands of these inquiries happening all the time, they may not answer every single detail just for you, but you can get a good feel for what does the system do, and then does it meet most of these needs? And then decide in the areas of needs that it does not meet, how critical are those? Because if it comes down to, you know, here's this handful of things we really, really need the system to do, you know, you may have to select a different vendor. Now, that being said, you know, there are some processes, I think too, that sometimes people expect that an eQMS can do absolutely everything under the sun. There are some out here there who will claim they can, but they don't necessarily do that well.
Yeah.
So
I think part of the issue too in the industry is I see a lot of companies, you know, maybe it's the clinical person or whoever going, finally they say, oh, we need a QMS. So we're going to get an eQMS, and then they go talk to the vendors and say, tell me what I need. You know, so it's again another example of not having that quality expertise in your company, and you know, you're responsible, you're the sponsor. So anyway, so I guess we're running out of time, but I mean, this, from my perspective, this has been a great conversation. I hope everybody has felt like it and has learned something and or got a new perspective. Again, that's my goal.
Too. Yep. Thank you, Penelope, again. We appreciate your time. And I think we got to most of the questions, but if not, do feel free to reach out. We're happy to continue these conversations. And yeah, I love the engagement. Thank you guys for sticking around and for having that chat with us. So Robin, I think we'll hand it back to you.